Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We are talking about a 2005 Chevy Cobalt with a 2.2 liter engine. We're going to discuss what was wrong with this vehicle and why it's sitting the way it is. This video is just for demonstration purposes. We are not doing any work on this vehicle today. We're just showing y'all what we did, why we had to do it. So, this right here is a 2005 Chevy Cobalt with a 2.2 liter engine. In my experience, I've owned HHRs with a 2.4 liter, and I can say that I love the older, modern Ecotec engines. I just don't like the 2.2s. The down with the 2.2s is that they got timing chains end up getting loose at under 190,000 miles. And the water pumps are also a number one problem. When the water pumps leak, they leak into the engine through the timing chain side. And they could also leak on the rear side of the motor down towards the intake. Which is the intake manifold. So, as you can tell on this motor here, I have removed the engine. I've removed the Ecotec engine out of a 2012 Chevy Cruze that I owned 3 times. This is the first time I ever had to remove the modern Ecotec engine from a 2005. And I can say it took me 10 hours max to get this engine out. The reason why is, one, I had to locate the bolts on these because I couldn't find them all at first. And it took me a little while longer, plus I work, had to help the wife out with certain things. Plus it was also bad weather all week last week, so that also delayed me from doing what I had to do. As you can see, there is no engine in this vehicle at this time. And as you can tell here in the video, and I know you're probably going to ask about it, is why is the transmission cracked on the top? And why is that bolt still in? Well, let me tell you. What happened there is that bolt is actually completely seized. The transmission was already cracked when we got the car. The car was only $500. All it needed was a starter. Put the new starter on, ran fine. The motor was already bad, and I'll show you that in a minute. The motor got so much water. The water pump was leaking so bad. I was leaking out of the rear, dripping like doot, and it leaked inside the engine. There was 2.1 gallons worth of 50/50 antifreeze that got into the motor, and the oil was really milky, and the dipstick was really cruddy. It was water in the oil pan, and there was I did investigation in the crankcase. There was the cylinder head. There was water. Looked like water drips inside the crankcase. There was also signs of metal shavings on the paper filter, which was silver shavings all up in the filter. So that's how I know something in the motor got shredded. That could have been either the pistons, the rods, but I was thinking that it was more, I was guaranteeing that the water pump probably caused the metal shavings to get into the oil pan and got into the filter. Then there was a crack on the engine itself, on that same exact side where the transmission's cracked. Now, what we investigated is that bolt was completely seized, couldn't get it off. The engine was already bad. The car was already getting ready to be chopped up or scrapped and selling it for parts, so we weren't worried about the transmission getting cracked. I was. But the bolt did not want to come out, and the only way we were able to get out was either saw it off, which was impossible for us to get to, and I didn't have a torch, so I said, oh, you know what? The engine's going to get dismantled anyway as a next video. Try our best with that. And transmission was actually good, but it ended up cracking in the process, and for some reason it just didn't work out the way it planned. And I've took out these engines before and never had these issues, but this engine here, that bolt was completely seized, and whoever had this car before did not take care of it. There was so many oil leaks on the motor. It was completely nasty. Things were broken on it. The engine wire and harness was completely fried on certain parts. Wires were missing. And I think the only code it had on this vehicle was a crankshaft position sensor problem. And it was leading, that had problems going on too. But as you can see here, transmission's still intact. CV axles, everything else is perfectly fine. Fuse box, everything. But that was my mother-in-law's vehicle. She doesn't want it anymore anyway. She doesn't like it. She liked it, but didn't like the fact that when water got into the engine, that just basically ruined it for her. She told me just to strip it. So, weren't really worried if the engine got cracked. I mean, to y'all probably sit there and think like, well, that's an unprofessional way to do it. No, yeah, it might be a little unprofessional, but we got it out, but we had no choice. But by the time I was even pulling on that bolt, the aluminum was already cracking already anyway, and it was impossible. So by the time we didn't take an impact, we took a socket. We tried a socket with a ratchet. We tried a 3/4 ratchet, tried a 1/4 ratchet, and it was just cracking all the way around the bolt, and there was no way around it. So I had to leave it in there because it was already cracked, and it just separated after that bolt came out, which I've never had that type of bad experience in my life. But either way, anyway, I don't recommend the 2.2s. I was more the 2.4. I've never had problems with the 2.4. Never had problems with the timing chains. I've owned the same engine before that had 400,000 miles, and the transmission went out before anything else. I know a lot of people want these cars because they want the engines. I'm gonna tell you right now, this car is for sale for it's $500. Like it is. Everything inside is, if it's mint. I mean, the interior is good. The headline looks like it's brand new. You got brand new tires on it. You know, we're trying to get it out of here, but junkyard tries to screw the junkyard we deal with tries to screw people over in prices all the time. So I can get more money selling the brand new tires with the rims, you know, the whole 9 yards. But anyway, I don't really like, me personally, I don't like these vehicles. I like Chevy, but I just don't like this car. I think it's an ugly car. But only good thing I've heard about them is that people say, oh, they're good cars. People would rather have one of these than a Chevy Cruze. And I don't, and I kind of agree with that, because Chevy Cruzes have bad engines, and they seem to go out under 120,000 miles. This vehicle here had 197,000 miles, and that's when the engine gave out. But we can go look at the engine here in a second. I'll show you the inside of this vehicle. We started doing we were somewhat into the stripping process of this vehicle. And this was cracked. That was normal. But you can see here that the headliner is in really, really good shape, which I was very surprised about. It's got the interior, the dash, and everything. If I can't sell the whole car, it's just going to get completely stripped out. 100%. So let's go look at the engine. This is the engine hoist that I used, which was the power torque. This is the 1.5 ton. Works perfectly on this 4 cylinders. Alright, here's the motor that came out of it, the 2.2. The difference between the 2.2 and the 2.4 are not really much of a difference. Can't really see anything different. The only thing that I noticed about these engines that might be different is that, yes, these Chevy Cobalt engines are compatible with Chevy HHR and Saturn Vue. As long as it's between the years of 2005, I think 2008. If I recall, with the Cobalts and the HHRs, the engines and transmissions will fit perfectly in those cars. But it has to be, let's make an example. If you have a 2.2, you can put any 2.2 from a Cobalt into an HHR, or you could do the opposite. But if you're going to put a 2.4 into a Chevy Cobalt, you got to replace the engine and the transmission with a 2.4. So this engine here, like I said, had timing chain issues. I mean, this is the flywheel and everything that was originally on it, and I was actually impressed that the timing chain was in perfectly great shape. And you could tell that this engine has had oil leak. You can see it right here. When I noticed it, it wasn't leaking oil at all until after she started driving it. So you can tell it's been leaking here, leaking down right there. And you can see how the thermostat housing, well, this is like the inlet pipe here for the hoses. It's really crusty. And you can see there's a little bit of rust in there, not much. This could be due to just normal rust from the hose never being replaced, or that could be just a sign that water has been in there. Mostly a lot of the Ecotec engines that I've seen that have not been maintained properly has always had this rust. And if they do, I've always sanded them down, get all the rust off, make it look nice before I put a new hose on, because this right here can make it where your hoses won't come off, and it can also cause it to be kind of like corrode, like welded on there, and you can end up ripping your hoses off, especially if they're brand new. But yeah, here, this is your oil filter housing for where your oil filter is. This is where we diagnosed when we found all the metal shavings, and it didn't look nice in there, but it was actually clean in here, just not on the filter. I didn't see any metal shavings inside here. This is the crankshaft position sensor. This is your oil pressure sensor. These are a common issue to leak. As you can tell that this thing here has been leaking in the past. And this has been leaking because this is bad, and the seal was already bad on this one. Most of the time on these engines, people would think that that this thing leaks, but this thing doesn't, because it's not replaceable. A lot of times what happens is when you see a lot of oil, like you can tell here that it's been leaking pretty bad, like right in here, this is usually a sign that the crankshaft position sensor or the oil pressure switch has been leaking. In my past experience, a lot of times when these oil pressure sensors seals go bad, they can pour out oil like no tomorrow. I had a car one time that you could lose up to a 2 quarts of oil in a 30-minute drive to work. And these things can cause a lot of issues, and you can burn these motors up quick. I mean, the oil pan and everything's still connected. You can see it's been pretty soaked here. I tried to put purple power on it, but it needs to be pressure washed, but I'm not going to worry about it because it's going to get dismantled anyway. But yeah, that's where the plastic intake manifold goes. And as you can see, this one here is also crusty. That's due to water or just normal wear and tear, but I didn't see any rust in there besides a teeny bit of white corrosion from the hoses never being replaced or being cleaned off. Here is your belt tensioner, and this looks like this is probably a 13, or looks like a 13, maybe a 15 millimeter, I assume. I would start with a 13. There's nothing wrong with this. Crankshaft's good, but it's got a rear main seal leak as well, which probably tells me why there's so much oil in the oil pan. But I also noticed that the oil pan gasket has also been leaking all the way around, mainly on the rear, around the whole rear, the transmission, on the whole rear and passenger side oil pan's been leaking pretty good because it was pretty wet down there. And this oil pan was siliconed. I couldn't find any oil pan gaskets for this thing. They said they don't make them because they're siliconed. So that could explain a lot. This here is where your water pump goes. So you take these bolts off to get to it, put the tool in there to be able to hold the crank chain in place. And basically, there you go. Here's where your thermostat is inside, connected to this. I think they call this a cooling pipe, engine cooling pipe. I've seen 3 different sites with the car parts. Some people call it an engine cooling pipe. Sometimes they're called engine compartment hose. And this was a pain in the ass. These hoses here are not fun to get off. So it's best to try to take it off on the firewall. But even though when these clamps are crap and you don't have a lot of leverage and a lot of room to get to it, sometimes it's best to cut them and just replace them. Right here is your temperature sensor. These also, I've noticed in my past time, that these can cause problems too. If these sensors malfunction or they get stuck closed or something, you will smell a fume of antifreeze, and it can make it where your engine can overheat and not lose any antifreeze. But it's always best to replace those when the engine is cold and not hot because of back pressure. I've learned that in my past, and it will burn your hand really bad. And this is where the bolts are to access the water pump to take it out after all this is basically pulled out. I mean, it's basically what it is. I mean, so just in case you don't know, if you got a 2.2 liter engine, you could take a 2.2 from an HHR, a Saturn Vue, or another Cobalt and slap it into the same vehicle and it's good to go. This, now, so you know, this engine still runs and it does not overheat. It only overheated once, from what the owner said. It went up to like 261 degrees, but it wasn't steaming or anything. And it might have been due to the water, but the timing chain is loose, but the engine is basically still good. I mean, if you can probably rebuild it if you really wanted to. And you can see where the crack is right here. The engine itself is not cracked. This is just a crack where the bracket, where that bolt went on that transmission. That's the only thing that's wrong with it. I mean, if the timing chains, because when I looked at the looked in the hole where the oil goes, the oil cap had no crud on it. I didn't see any metal shavings in the oil that came out of the oil or anything. But eventually we're going to take everything apart and see what's wrong. This engine to me is basically scrap, but it can be rebuilt and redone and re-put into another vehicle. But if I don't see anything wrong with the pistons, the rods, or any scrapes against the cylinder head walls, then I think the engine could be good for a rebuild. Some people say you can re-weld that, but I don't really believe in welding stuff like this because it's called half-ass work. But that's totally up to me. But alright, I hope this video helps, showing y'all the engine and demonstrating to y'all for a 2005 Chevy Cobalt. And just a reminder, this video does have a lot of talking. If you don't like this video, you do not have to watch it. I know there's a lot of videos for Chevy Cobalt, but not enough is what people want to see. But if you like this video, you can subscribe to my channel. You can hit that subscribe button. And feel free to comment. And y'all have yourselves a great day. Be safe out there.